Hello, my friends, and welcome back to our Theology podcast here at The Bridge. And today we have a special bonus episode for you. I'm very thrilled to have one of our global workers that we support. Steve is here with us. He works in a sensitive area of the world that we won't name, but he happens to be, among other things, many areas of knowledge that Steve has. He's a very brilliant guy, if you don't mind me saying. We talked a week or so ago about the Bible, and we mentioned Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, Steve actually is can I say an expert in studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, and so I thought, man, let's get him on here and learn a little bit about the Dead Sea Scrolls and related things. So, Steve, thanks so much for taking some time to travel here to be with us today, and share some of your knowledge with us. We'd love to just hear about it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, self-proclaimed probably expert. I've been researching it a long time though, and I'm fascinated. I feel like whether it's the story of how they were found or how that affects the New Testament, which we're going to talk about mostly today. But also, first what I'd like to do is talk about what most of us are thinking is Dead Sea Scrolls helped us to understand the Bible that we have already. It brought us back to ancient times, we're going to say, in a sense. But first of all, I think most of us think the Dead Sea Scrolls are a bunch of biblical manuscripts.
Right.
But it's actually much more than that. Those are the ones that will be mentioned in your footnotes, in your Bibles, especially the new ones. But we're going to see there's much else. There was actually 930 documents found in these scrolls. And then many of them, nearly all of them are in pieces.
Yeah.
There's 11 caves.
Okay.
And so one of the caves, cave 4, we believe that people would probably just put the scrolls on the ground, and those are obviously in immense pieces, and took some of them 30, 40 years for the scholars to finally get to those pieces, find out how, but in the end you end up
puzzle.
with... Yeah.
Trying to put them together.
Exactly, but 930 puzzles maybe.
Yeah, whoa.
So you end up with these documents, but the documents aren't all Bible scrolls only. They're all Judaism, and you'll probably read that they're very likely Essenes, and it's maybe best to think of the Essenes as a big group and the Qumran community as part of it.
Okay.
There might have been more Essenes in different places.
So Essenes were a sect of Judaism, basically?
So Sadducees in the New Testament,
Yep.
Pharisees mentioned in the New Testament.
Yep.
There's Essenes, and one of the writers we get a lot of our history from, Josephus, mentions all three of these.
Okay, great.
So the New Testament doesn't actually mention them by name.
Okay.
But of the 930 manuscripts, I have these details from other places, but I put them here. Forgive me for reading off my phone.
Yeah, fine.
230 are biblical manuscripts, and those are easy for us to know because we can identify very easily this is from Isaiah.
Yep.
And then there's 250 that we're going to call from common Judaism.
Okay.
So what that means is, for example, there's the Old Testament Apocrypha that includes Tobit and these other books, Judith. There's a book called Ecclesiasticus in the New Testament, not Ecclesiastes. So we think that it's not just Essenes that like these books because we find them in other places. And there might be a book of a whole bunch of Psalms that we didn't know about. And then we're probably going to assume all Jews would like those Psalms too. So those would also go in the common Judaism group. They're going to be very much like the Bible, but they're not the Bible we know. Okay. And then there's these 350 texts, which are sectarian. They are actually clearly that group talking about Judaism in their way.
Okay.
And then there's probably 100 or so. We just don't really know enough about maybe the scroll is so messed up. How would we know if all Jews would like it or just the Qumran scroll? So those could be in 2 or 3.
Okay.
But the reason that's important is if you buy, for example, the standard introduction, as I understand it, there's many of them now, is by Geza Vermesh. You can buy it from Penguin. There doesn't have any Bible in here. The whole thing is talking about the other manuscripts because the assumption is that you'll read the Bible in your translation and you'll get a translation of all the other documents.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do for a few minutes is just talk about the Bible manuscripts and what we've learned from them, and then I want to go into what I think is more exciting, which is how these documents helped us understand the New Testament, if that's cool.
Do it.
With the
Let's do it.
pastorship here.
Yeah, let's do it.
So first of all, this is really going to be surprising to some of you, but if Abraham lived in 2000 BC and David lived in 1000 BC, they all go off to Babylon and come back under Ezra and Nehemiah, and let's just say 500, but really it's more like 450. Okay? Then Jesus is in around 0. That's why we have our whole calendar built on him. The church starts, and then Jesus obviously read the Bible. Ezra read the Bible. David. But if you open up an Old Testament in English, it's translated from Hebrew manuscripts from AD 800 and 900. Those were the oldest manuscripts we had, other than there's a small papyri called Nash papyri, which is very small. I don't think it's much bigger than my hand. I haven't seen it, but I'm looking at pictures trying to figure that out. So as you can imagine, skeptics would say, you're reading something from the 800s, 900s AD. How do you know that Jesus read the same? Or Ezra or David? Well, this manuscript find has 230 biblical manuscripts, and all of a sudden scholars can be like, wow, we're putting it before Jesus, the time frame. They've put all the scrolls they've dated them with carbon-14 and with studying handwriting to know what the time frame is, from 250 BC to about 50 CE or 50 AD. So in that time frame you'll find, so they're all Jesus or before. So now I can take this manuscript and be like, did I read the same words Jesus read?
Remarkable.
And so what you end up finding, so we're pushing our knowledge all the way back to ancient times. Not as far as Ezra and David yet, but all the way to Jesus. And it shows us that our manuscripts were preserving a very ancient reading. It's as old as Jesus, as old as 250, as old as 200. However, I will want to say, though, it's more than that. For example, we have many manuscripts of many books. The most we have of are Deuteronomy, Isaiah, and Psalms. We're going to try and get into this concept of not having a book, but having scrolls in a little bit. But we don't see the exact same wording, for example, in Isaiah in every scroll. So what we are translating, we believe, and we have every reason to believe, is the best of an ancient reading, but there are differences. And what's so amazing is the Qumran community would put the same, 2 manuscripts of the same verses in the same cave. And in the same, they have their own kind of pots, and they were found in these. They're long and cylindrical. They're not big and for water. And they're in the same
Would they design these pots for the scrolls? Is that what you think? Or?
Well, there's a scholar named Jody Magnus, if I could quote her. She's done, as far as I know, the most recent and the best book on that stuff. She thinks those were designed particularly for Qumran, but for a different reason. And it was about, it's kind of complicated, but not for the scrolls. For another one of their sacrificial rules. It fits their needs better.
And you've mentioned the Qumran community. That's the area where these scrolls were found.
Thank you very much.
And where the Essenes lived.
Yes. So it's in Israel, next to the Dead Sea, very remote. It's hard to describe. You've probably been there. It's hard to describe feeling any more like you're on the moon than Qumran. They purposely were trying to be away.
They got away.
Anyways, what I was getting at was they didn't seem to mind that. Now let me give you an example of how these might be different, and then I'm going to show you 2 passages from the Bible that our translations actually are slightly edited, either with just a footnote or actually the text, depending on how it's done. Because again, we know that what we have is as old as Jesus. So it's enough for us, but we do sometimes want to know, if there were differences, what are they? And I'm going to bring up 2 small ones. But for example, cave 1, there's 11 caves. So when you see the scholarly designations, it'll say like 1QS. That means the first cave of Qumran, and then S stands for, in this case, Sadak, which is the community rule. It might be 1Q Isaiah A, or 1Q Isaiah B, because 2 scrolls of Isaiah were found in Cave 1. And the difference between these is, I think, illuminates what I was saying. One of them is the whole of Isaiah. The other one is most of it.
Okay.
And one of them matches our text so carefully. I mean, like, the scribe is doing such a good job, and he obviously has something just like ours.
Wow.
Like, we're talking 99%, like,
Amazing.
like letters.
Yeah.
But the other one actually has a few different words. There's a word shoval in Isaiah, very old word, and it has a different word there, and we think that it's because they were updating it to a word that others would know. Those kind of changes or adaptions or whatever, and we don't know if they put both of those Isaiahs as just important. Maybe one of them was helping us understand the other, like a paraphrase and a literal translation.
Like the Message paraphrase.
Exactly. They already have Targumim, which is the old Jewish way of doing a paraphrase. They have those as well. So they don't view the Bible probably exactly like we do because we have a book. But we have every reason to think that we're translating the very best things out there now. But we wouldn't have known as well.
Yeah.
We would have taken it more on faith. Now we still have to take it on faith that Ezra maybe had the same thing in David.
Sure.
But we're all the way back to Jesus,
Yeah.
and it's huge for us.
Yeah.
I will just real quickly, this is a very newly published Bible, so it has a lot of footnotes about the Old Testament. We've known lots of problems, problems, we use that word in a light way, but issues with the text. For example, in Exodus 1:4, it says the total number of Jacob's descendants was 70. But we've known that in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Bible, also before Jesus, it says 75. And then, interestingly enough, when Stephen is giving his sermon in Acts 7, Stephen, one of the very first Christians, he mentions 75, not 70.
Okay.
Well, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found one Exodus text that says 70.
Yeah.
Actually, not all of them have the whole Bible, right? So you might find a scroll that doesn't have this verse, but one that has 70 and one that has 75.
Wow.
So both of them were old. And I'm a translator. I work with translation. I don't want anybody to think I mess up 70 by writing 75. That wouldn't have been the translator's issue. That would have actually been, so probably, well, anyways, they were both very old. So this text actually says the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint read 75. But please notice, this might be confusing. I just explained that one text does, but another text reads 70. So this vote implies that everything is 75. That's actually not the case. But they preserved all of it.
Yeah.
Another one, and this one's great. There was, well, you could look it up yourselves in 1 Samuel 11.
Okay.
There's a couple verses that we didn't know. One of the scrolls of 1 Samuel has some verses about Nahash that explains that he's a king, and we didn't know that. And the story makes more sense with these verses.
Whoa.
So most of us think that maybe actually it is the oldest. So some translations have put it in, others have just put it in a footnote. But those are the kind of things that come up, and you won't find them on every page or anything.
Right.
But the best scholars have found wonderful things. So that was a long description of what you probably thought Dead Sea Scrolls was about. It's pushed us back into ancient times, which is a blessing.
Yep.
But it isn't also just like now we know we're perfectly right. We still have things to discuss. But has shed light on the issues we've always known about. But that is not, to me, the most exciting thing. I would like to read to you.
It gets better.
I would like to read to you from what's called the Community Rule. It was first published as under a different name, the Manual of Discipline. Now, this is, again, just a standard translation. I'm just reading it. There's lots of translations of these, and as far as I know, they're all great. I wouldn't worry about buy the cheapest one you can.
I'm sure everyone's going to run out and buy one of these, right?
I'm telling you, this is great stuff. So again, this is before Jesus. So if we see something that connects with the New Testament, we think, oh, well, it was already in Judaism, or they were already talking like that, or this maybe is counteracting it. So I'm reading from the very beginning of the Community Rule. There's an introduction in this, and it says, the Community Rule is probably, this is not the text, this is the introduction written by the editor. The Community Rule is probably one of the oldest documents of the sect, the Qumran sect he's talking about. Its composition may have originated around 100 BC, And the Cave 1 copy, because it was found in Cave 1, there's other copies in other caves found, it's is produced probably a quarter of a century after that date. So probably from 75 BC. Anyways, what does this say? Well, this is a book probably for the leader, and it's of how he's supposed to lead his group. It says, "The masters shall teach the saints to live according to the book of the community rule, that they may seek God with a whole heart and soul and do what is good and right before him, as he commanded by the hand of Moses and all his servants the prophets, that they may love all he has chosen and hate all that he has rejected."
Whoa.
That reminds me of Jesus. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That's not in the Bible. Hate your enemy is not in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But people were saying things like that.
Wow.
They maybe saw it in the Old Testament, but those exact words were not there. Maybe Jesus is actually referring to this overly done presentation of the Old Testament. There's other things. I would like to skip ahead to a couple other. I could have read a lot more, obviously, but
We got a little less than 5 minutes left, so
yeah. So I'm going to have to hustle
Great
through
stuff.
here.
Probably could have done an hour.
Now, another thing we find is that the community rule and other texts quote the same passages often quoted in the New Testament. So New Testament quoting, like Paul, quoting someone from the Old Testament.
Yep.
For example, and when these I'm reading from, where am I reading from? This is the 8th column. It's in columns and then line numbers. 8th column, a little ways down. "And when these become members of the community in Israel, according to all these rules, they shall separate from the habitation, from the living space of unjust men, and shall go into the wilderness," which the Qumran community did, "to prepare their way of him, as it is written, prepare in the wilderness the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a path for our God." That's Isaiah 40, verse 3, or is it 41? I think it's 40, verse 2. This thing might be, it's Roman numerals. I need to learn to read those. And that's exactly like the New Testament quotes about John the Baptist.
Yeah.
This one will throw you. I'm reading from column 9 now. "They shall depart from none of the counsels of the law to work in all the stubbornness of their hearts, but shall be ruled by the primitive precepts in which the men of the community were first instructed." And now look at this. "Until there shall come the prophet and the messiahs of Aaron and Israel."
Wow.
We maybe are surprised that the New Testament struggles to understand Messiah.
Yeah.
Well, they did definitely struggle with the Messiah being a servant, which Jesus explains to us. They thought he would have been maybe more of a victorious,
Conquering hero.
conquering
Yeah,
leader.
yeah.
But Jews were talking about messiahs, at least some.
Yeah.
And they often talked about a priestly Messiah, like a Messiah of Levi, and then the Messiah of David, or the kingly one. And it's all over these writings. So what I'd like to do now is just list some other things that I found interesting, because we're running out of time. I mentioned sons of light maybe I didn't get to that verse at the very beginning of the community rule, but words we're used to from the New Testament: sons of light, sons of darkness. There's lots of mention of Melchizedek, which is that funny, interesting character from Genesis 14, but the writer of Hebrews talks about him.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect
Jesus
that.
comes in his line. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, Christians aren't just searching wherever they can to find anything about Jesus. It's already being talked about, and they're like, wait, Jesus fulfills that too.
Wow.
I think that's what we're finding so much. I mentioned quotes of Isaiah 40, quotes of Habakkuk 2:4, which is the big one for Paul. There's others. They talk about sharing wealth. They talk about living communally. Lots of talk of light and dark. And there's other things I could talk about. Maybe there's a different calendar, and maybe that answers a big question we've had about, did Jesus die on Passover, or did Jesus die the day after? You'll read that people disagree about this. It almost looks like Matthew, Mark, and Luke say one thing, and John says something slightly different. Well, maybe actually they are saying something slightly different, and John's using one calendar for his this.
Calendar.
That's possible. That's been proposed. There's other ways to solve that problem as well. And the last thing I'll say is Jesus is always talking about the heart of the law. It's not what goes into the mouth of a man that makes him defiled, but what comes out.
Yeah.
This was a huge problem in all of Judaism. And if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, you realize that the Pharisees weren't even the worst. They were actually more trying to be at the heart of the law than the Essenes. The Essenes had even more about outwardliness.
Yeah,
And
the outward restrictions and laws and things like that.
It's amazing to me. So Jesus is getting at the very problem, probably dealing with the groups that were closer to the right answer than these that were way off, which threw me as I was reading the scrolls.
Well, you're blowing our minds right now. I think you are blowing our minds, but this is so cool. I think just to summarize, that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have great attestation, old stuff of the scriptures that we have, but also these gems of other documents coming from Judaism, and especially this sect of the Qumran sect, the Essenes, that are similar to either a different group than the Sadducees or the Pharisees, the Essenes, and we see that even the New Testament, some of the New Testament that we have, we can understand it a little bit better in understanding some of the thought that these ancient Jews had. This is, what we need to do. We need to have you back and do like a 2-hour seminar or something. We're going to have to do that sometime.
Well, it's on video now, so I guess I have to come. But I really enjoyed this. I love this stuff. I love this church. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to these podcasts. We'd love to make sure that you are aware of all of them that pop up. And go out and buy your copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls now and read through it. Great stuff. Thank you again, Stephen, so much. Love you all. We'll see you next time.